Hello and welcome to this special broadcast. With the NDA 3.0 taking over, the focus will be on India's energy transition and to see what new reforms and investments the government is able to bring in. The World Bank has announced the second loan for India's green hydrogen mission. How will the World Bank support India's green hydrogen and energy transition? To talk about it all is Auguste Kouame, who's joining us today. He's the World Bank Country Director for India. Auguste, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. First of all, I'd like to ask you about the progress that you have made with the first development policy loan for India's clean energy transition that you had announced in June 2023. That was a $1.5 billion loan. What has been the progress on that front?
Thank you very much, Parikshit, for this question. Well, the first loan came about as an effort to support the implementation of the National Green Hydrogen Mission that was issued by the Government of India in January 2023. So progress has been quite satisfactory and perhaps even impressive because already the government has moved quite fast to stimulate demand in areas such as fertilizers and refineries under the first operations that we approved, that our board approved in June 2023. And we have also worked with the government to start putting in place regulations to ensure safety of production of green hydrogen, production of electrolyzers. We've also made some steps to come up with actions for research and development on the government side that will later stimulate private investment. So some progress have been made, and I should say, beyond green hydrogen per se, the first operation has also created some dynamism in the whole renewable energy sector because, as you know, green hydrogen depends on renewable energy such as solar or wind. So the first operation has helped encourage investment in those sectors by removing the cost or some of the fees that producers would pay to connect their wind or solar energy to the grid so that this can feed into the production of green hydrogen. So these are initial steps, and it is not sufficient. That's why the second operation becomes necessary. And even the second operation may not be the last effort on the part of the World Bank to support the development of green hydrogen in India, because it is a long-term effort. The government is aiming to mobilize up to 100 billion in private investment for green hydrogen alone as part of this mission. So it will take a few years.
It will take a few years. So $1.5 billion was the first development policy loan for green hydrogen. Has that been fully utilized? And what is the latest round of funding or the development loan that you're announcing?
So the way the development policy loan works is that it provides financing for effort already made, and it doesn't necessarily finance direct activities. So yes, it has been utilized because it was part of the Government of India's budget that for the fiscal year that closed in March. So it has been utilized. This is our assumption. And the next operation hopefully will be part of the current budget cycle, and hopefully it will be utilized also for supporting the government effort, to do what it had planned to do under the National Green Hydrogen Mission to stimulate private investment and also provide initial funding to reduce the costs for research and development as well as for production of electrolyzers and actual production of green hydrogen.
Right. So the second development policy loan is for $1.5 billion. Right. How is this going to be utilized, and what's going to be the strategy behind deploying this fund?
So, as I said, maybe we need to explain a bit how the World Bank financing instruments work. What we're talking about here is a development policy loan, as opposed to an investment policy financing, an investment project financing, rather. If it were an investment project financing, we would have been financing direct input or activities under the project. For a development policy loan, we do not finance direct activities under the project. We provide financing into the government budget in support of a number of policies and regulations that the government will put in place for a bigger objective, a bigger development objective. So with the utilization, the connection between the fund and the actual activities under the development policy financing is not as watertight as it is under investment project financing. So utilization is, part of the broader government budget.
Right. Any goals that you have set as part of the second loan?
Yes, the goals are very clear, both in terms of direct policies, which we call prior actions, to support the green hydrogen development, as well as in terms of supporting the broader goal of supporting the economy and stabilizing the financing, the overall financing of the government. So the goals for the policies are they're in three buckets. First bucket is to stimulate green hydrogen production and consumption. And under that, we have agreement for the government to take actions to, again, as I said, to continue encouraging the bulk purchase of green hydrogen for fertilizer and for refineries and maybe for some other sectors. That will give encouragement to the private sector to invest because they will know that their output will be purchased. And the government will also increasingly encourage other hard-to-abate sectors to do likewise. Under the broader renewable energy, we're also continuing to encourage the connection between production of solar as well as wind and hopefully perhaps even floating solar as input for green hydrogen, so that the green hydrogen doesn't become so there is enough renewable energy for green hydrogen as well as for other use in the economy. And we continue to encourage the development of financing for renewable more broadly. So we're looking at, under this operation, to encourage the emergence of carbon market or development of carbon market. We continue to ensure that when private sector wants to invest in green bond, there is a framework for it, there is a taxonomy for it. So these are some of the policy goals under the operation.
Right.
And then, as I said, as broadly put, this operation also fits into the government's broader effort to stimulate growth through a stable macroeconomic framework. So it is also one of the goals to ensure that the government financing is sourced in a way that is not too costly, and our loans are not costly. They're long-term, so they provide affordable financing as well as long-term financing to the government of India for a broader development strategy.
Auguste, we would also like to ask you about the level of investments that you've seen so far. The government has set itself a target of $100 billion in investments in the green hydrogen ecosystem through the mission plan. What has been the level of interest that you've seen?
Well, we've seen a high level of interest, surprisingly. And the interest we've seen suggests that, in fact, the government's objective of 100 billion might well be exceeded when it's all said and done. Because already we're seeing that based on our estimate, there is interest from the private sector to invest up to 70 billion already in green hydrogen production and in electrolyzer production. And this 70 billion has come 70 billion interest or announcement or commitment has come very, very fast. And in the coming years, you will see more announcement coming up. And I'm very confident that the 100 billion target will be achieved and perhaps exceeded. And this is nothing new, really, in India, where a small investment on the part of the government, accompanied by a good package of reforms, regulations, and incentives, have generated so much private investment. If we take the example of the solar parks, at our level, at the World Bank level, we provided a loan of 70 million to the government to the various states And that 70 million loan generated 4.2 billion worth of private investment in the solar parks. In the case of REWA, which I mentioned earlier, the loan to REWA, the public sector sourced World Bank loan to REWA was only 17 million, 17, and that generated more than $500 million, meaning 30 times the size of the initial loan in the form of private investment. So the National Green Hydrogen Mission, which is a 2.4 billion government program, will generate a lot of private investment and probably a lot more. So we're very encouraged that already 70 billion worth of private investment have been announced based on our calculation.
So you feel that when it comes to production of green hydrogen, deploying green hydrogen for the use in manufacturing and even exports, India could take the lead globally?
Yes, India could be one of the biggest producers of green hydrogen for initially for domestic consumption, because India has a big market already. There are a number of sectors that are very dependent on energy consumption, such as steel, even construction, transport. Those sectors will need to decarbonize, especially if they want to export their output, because with CBAM, with the Carbon Border Adjustment mechanism of the EU, if those sectors don't decarbonize, they will not be able to break into the European market or other foreign market, or they may not be able to increase their market shares. So those sectors will consume a lot of green hydrogen, which India will produce. And then there will also be an opportunity to export green hydrogen produced in India to other countries. And there is demand. Other countries, we hear that some European countries would like to import green hydrogen from India. So whenever India is ready to export its green hydrogen, there will be a market for it. But I have to say, you know, it's a win-win for India. There is a big domestic market, and there is demand for its green hydrogen by other countries. So what needs to take place now is, you know, expand production.
Expand production. The statement by the World Bank also said that the policy loan will also support reforms on renewable energy penetration by, for instance, incentivizing battery energy storage solutions and amending the Indian electricity grid code to improve renewable energy integration into the grid. Give us a sense of how these reforms or the changes will be supported, how the World Bank will be steering these reforms along with the Indian government.
So on grid integration, for example, you know, if you were to produce renewable energy, wind or solar somewhere, you know, you put up your investment, you produce, and then you need to sell it to the grid. And oftentimes it's easier said than done, because you need to transport it to the grid. And to transport it to the grid, sometimes you pay transportation fees, you pay transmission fees. And sometimes actually the connection, the transmission infrastructure is not there. So what the operation does is first to put in place a framework for the government to invest more in transmission infrastructure, but more importantly is to also reduce the cost of transmission by private producers, paid by private producers into the grid. So when you produce your wind energy, you will pay less to transport it and add it to the overall grid. And there are policies that are already in place which waive those fees initially for a given period of time, say for, you know, up to 2026, and the operation will provide incentive to the government to extend that waiver period, so that when you go and produce your wind, you know that for a long period of time you will be able to connect it to the grid at low cost, and that will increase the return on your own investment. So that's one example of how the operation is helping the integration of renewable into the grid. And this is important because, again, green hydrogen means higher consumption of renewable energy, and green hydrogen should not be the only consumer of renewable energy. There are other ways, other needs for renewable energy. So if you want to push up the production of green hydrogen, you need to push up even more so the production of renewable energy so that there is no conflict between green hydrogen and other uses of renewable energy.
Right. So as you're saying, a lot of investment potential in India's green energy transition. On that note, we're taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. This conversation with World Bank's country director for India on India's green hydrogen mission and energy transition continues on the other side.